Hey, Read Through the Word. Today is January 18th, and today's lesson is called Ending the Beginning. We are in the very last two verses in the book of Genesis. And here we go. It says this. Chapter 50, verses 21 and 20. Not 21. 25 and 26. Here we go. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath. He said, "When God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you." So Joseph died at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Talking about the last verse in Genesis is, I say, one of my favorites, but I sure do love the book of Genesis. There is an old Bible study, some of you might remember it, called The Patriarchs, that is all through the book of Genesis. And I taught that study quite a few times. And I love the book of Genesis. There's so much. If you look at historically, like in the Old Testament covers a period of over 3,000 years. And, let's see, 1,500 of it is in the book of Genesis. And maybe a little bit more than that. I'm not math. That's math. I'm doing all this subtraction in my head. And all the people named in everything in here. So in the Bible, let's throw some nerd in here. In the Bible, there are 3,237 people given names. It doesn't count like people that are just called widow or something like that. People who actually have names. Of that, 1,794 of them have unique names, meaning no one else in the Bible has the name they do, like Jesus. There's one Jesus. There's quite a few Marys. There's 5 Johns. And this is how you know how impactful in the book, because you got to think about all the names and genealogies. Remember that you're not skipping anymore. There are 13 Josephs in the Bible, because this one's going to make a big impact. The number one name in the Bible, I should give a prize. I don't know if anybody got it, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you. It's Zechariah. There are 31 people named Zechariah in the Bible. Like, what? Yes, it was a popular name in its time. So all of these, so the Bible over 3,000 years. And then in the Old Testament, there are 2,000 people that are talked about. And it is, when we think, and it's such a book of beginnings. The beginning of the universe. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It was the beginning of the nations of the world. Genesis chapter 11, the Tower of Babel. And Genesis chapter 10 was the Table of Nations. The beginning of the nation of Israel. Abraham, Genesis chapter 12. When we get him and his call and the covenant in like 15 and 17. And so all of that is the beginning of the outworking in time and space that God himself created of his plan of redemption that was laid before the foundations of the earth. It all starts here. And it's just fascinating. God loved man. He gave them a beautiful garden, Eden, to live in. They will live and work in their worship and walk with him. If life was going to be great for anybody, it was Adam and Eve. Be like the idea of a utopia, they had it. But the account of creation is followed by the beginning of sin and death. A book that begins with creation in a beautiful garden in Eden ends dead in a coffin in Egypt. Dead because of sin, cast far east. No, hold on, I gotta think. They were sent east out of the garden. We don't know where the garden is because of this whole flood thing. It totally removed everything. But they were sent far from where they were supposed to be. They're not in the promised land. They've been sent out of that. And then, he is given an Egyptian embalming. He's mummified. And so, but he's going to need to be because he's got a long days ahead. Because what happened is God's commanded will be fruitful and multiply. Go and spread around the earth. Look back through Genesis where God gives these commands. And they've been ignored. They've been defied. No, but what we see is that, and we've had this talk here before about God's commanded will and God's decreed will. Nothing's getting in the way of the decreed will. His decreed will is still at work. And Joseph knows that. The coffin stood as a promise of the next chapter of the story as we open in the book of Exodus. Think of, when we're talking about a coffin, we think about modern coffin. Think sarcophagus. He's not, although he was second in command, so he would have had a huge funeral procession. There would have been a state funeral for Joseph. But his sarcophagus would have been made of stone. You've seen all the mummy robbing in pyramids, how they have to push the big heavy stone off, and then he's inside one of those big stone things that people push off. He's inside of that. So what's going to happen is he's put in there his bones, and he said, when you leave, not if, when God takes you back home, take me with you. So this coffin is standing as a promise of the next chapter. So you think about this. So he would have been given a place of honor. I'm trying to think. I know I watched a movie of the Ten Commandments, and they did a really good job showing Joseph's sarcophagus and how it would have been treated, and he would have been revered. And but that sarcophagus stood basically as a monument of the belief in the promises of God for 400 years. When we turn our page, it's going to be 400 years later. And it stood there, reminding them one day we're going home. Because God's made a promise and he will keep it. Joseph remembered that. Joseph knew God would be faithful. And Joseph's sarcophagus, and Joseph's is not going to be buried for a really long time. He's going to sit, the bones will be in the sarcophagus for 400 years. They will carry Joseph's bones through the desert and the wilderness wanderings for 40 years. Through the settling of the land. It's going to be a while before they get back to Shechem to bury him. So, it's a reminder that the coffin's not the end of the story. The promised land would come. The promised nation would come. And Israel would take Joseph with them. The coffin in the last verse in the book of Genesis is the promise that God's plan is not done. A coffin's not the end of the story, then or now. We'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.